Thank you everybody so much for joining us today. We are really grateful that you're here. Just a few things before we get started. Please mute your sound throughout the webinar. If you're comfortable, feel free to turn on your video, and we will be having a question and answer session about 15 minutes at the end. So if you have a question you would like to be answered during the Q&A portion, please feel free to type it in the chat box. For today, we will be talking about positive behavioral interventions and supports in the home, presented by Morgan Hutchinson. Morgan is a graduate student in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program here at the University of Utah, and she is also a very valued member here at the U-TTEC lab. So I'll turn it over to Morgan.
Awesome, thanks Annie. Give me 1 minute just to get situated. Oh, it says I need to have screen sharing enabled.
Let me make you the host for now and then give it a try.
Continue. Yes, I think this is going to work.
Perfect.
All right, let's see, 1 second. Okay, can y'all see that okay? Perfect. All right, everybody. Well, like Annie said, my name is Morgan Hutchinson, and I'm a grad student at the U studying clinical mental health counseling, and I'm also taking coursework to become a board certified behavior analyst. So I'm involved in the behavior response support team, and we are a collaboration with Granite School District to provide Tier 1 school-wide and classroom-wide behavior support for elementary schools. And then BURST is just one of the many projects that is part of the U-TTEC lab. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to present to you all today on positive behavior interventions and supports in the home. And I just want to recognize how busy and crazy all of your lives likely are. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you're able to leave this webinar feeling just a little refreshed and ready to tackle the challenges of parenting. So the objectives for this webinar are first to understand the difference between reactive and proactive parenting and what that looks like. And then we're going to dive into what PBIS is and how it can be useful in your home. And then we're going to talk about how we can implement PBIS practices in order to help reduce problem behavior and how you can do that as a parent in your home with your children. And then fourth, we're going to talk about strategies for correcting problem behavior and implementing negative consequences when problem behavior continues to occur. Now, there could be a lot of different reasons why you're attending this webinar. Perhaps you've run out of shows to binge on Netflix, you have some time to kill, or maybe your home looks something like the following. Like this, or this, or this, or maybe even this. So if your life resembles these images, you might be doing a little bit more reactive parenting versus proactive parenting. And you're probably feeling a little frustrated and exhausted. So we're going to talk about what's the difference between reactive and proactive parenting. So reactive parenting is really implementing negative consequences or dealing with problem behavior after it occurs. So you probably feel like all you do is get on to your kids, sending them to timeout or to their room, or just implementing some kind of punishment, trying to keep up with the negative behaviors that are happening. And that's exhausting and not fun for anybody. Now, proactive parenting is a little bit different. So in proactive parenting, we're creating or controlling a situation or the environment to help reduce the likelihood that problem behavior will happen in the first place, instead of just waiting to deal with it after it has already happened. And so an example of this could be, an example of like reactive parenting would be, let's say your expectation is for your child to do their homework. Reactive parenting would be, you didn't get your homework done, so you lost tablet time. And what's going to likely happen? Your child's likely going to throw a fit. They're going to have some problem behaviors just because they got that consequence. Whereas proactive parenting, your expectation is still that they complete their homework, but you're going to remind them that that is your expectation, and you give them a warning. So 5 more minutes on your tablet, and then you have to do homework. So if they have time to prepare and know what to expect, then they're less likely to have problem behaviors when it is time for them to do homework. Now, this isn't black or white either. So sometimes you might be more reactive and sometimes you might be more proactive in your parenting approach. It kind of depends on the situation and what comes up. However, the more proactive we can be, the better, because the more proactive we are, or if we rely too heavily on reactive parenting, you're probably going to be spending a lot of your time dealing with or working with problem behaviors after they have occurred. And that's going to take up so much time. Whereas with proactive parenting, you're going to put in a little bit of effort ahead of time to help prevent the likelihood that problem behavior will occur in the first place. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, that we're going to try to prevent the likelihood problem behavior will occur, or that we're going to try to reduce problem behavior, because that's what the focus is. So the idea of proactive parenting brings us to the main topic of this webinar. What is PBIS? PBIS, or Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, is a proactive, there's that word proactive again, it's a proactive behavior management system used to help reduce the likelihood that problem behavior will occur in the first place. So I'm not saying problem behaviors will disappear, but just imagine what your life would be like if your child's problem behaviors reduced dramatically. Now, you probably have a lot more time on your hands, you'd feel less stressed, and your home would more likely be a more positive growing environment for everyone. I think that sounds pretty nice. So this is what implementing PBIS in your home could do. Again, it's not going to make problem behavior disappear completely or forever. It's not magic, but it can help dramatically decrease the amount of problem behaviors. And on the next few slides, we're going to break down each part of PBIS, what each of those words in the title means. So first of all, PBIS is positive, and this means that we're going to avoid harsh and stigmatizing punishments. So instead of constantly getting onto your child and punishing them all the time, we're going to focus instead on teaching or instructing them on what behaviors are expected. And then we're going to also focus on adjusting the environment to support the child learning and adopting those more desirable behaviors. I'm not saying you can't ever send your child to their room or time out, but if you find yourself having to resort to punishment or correction often, you may want to consider the possibility that it's not quite as effective as you think it might would be. And that's where we're going to work on the positive side. And the second is behavior. So there are 3 principles of PBIS, and that is that behavior is learned, behavior is lawful, and behavior can be changed. Now, if behavior is learned, then we have to teach our children the expectations or what behavior we expect to see. And then behavior is lawful. This just really means that behavior occurs because it's being reinforced. So we don't really do anything in life unless we're getting something out of it. For example, you probably wouldn't go to work unless you are getting paid for it. Even if you really like your job, you still need that paycheck as reinforcement. And the same works for your child's problem behavior. That problem behavior is serving some purpose. So we're going to make sure that the positive behavior is more heavily reinforced than their problem behavior. And also the third is that behavior can be changed. So if behavior is learned and it's more likely to occur when it is reinforced, then we can change behavior by teaching new behaviors and then reinforcing these new behaviors. And when the new, more desirable behaviors provide more reward than the old behaviors, then our problem behavior is likely to decrease while more desirable behaviors are likely to increase. And then interventions and supports. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically I'm not going to discuss theory the entire time on this webinar. I'm going to give you some hands-on strategies you can implement in your home to help reduce problem behavior and to help intervene with cycles of this problem behavior and just to support more desirable behaviors. And also, PBIS is an evidence-based practice, meaning there's a lot of research that shows PBIS is effective in reducing problem behaviors. Now, if we're going to talk about PBIS in the home, we need to briefly take a look at PBIS in the schools, because this is kind of where it started. So PBIS is used in the schools to help improve student outcomes, reduce problem behaviors, and improve teacher outcomes. And it's used very widely in schools to do this. PBIS is also, it's a 3-tiered system of support. So each of these tiers aligns with an intensity of behavior support that children or students need. So the higher up you go, the more intense intervention or support is needed. Now, all children need that tier 1 or the universal core instruction. In fact, 80% of students only need tier 1 supports to help manage problem behavior. That's kind of what the research tells us. Now, some might need tier 1 plus a more targeted tier 2 intervention, and then very few are going to need tier 1, tier 2, and then more intensive tier 3 interventions. But today we're really going to be focusing on establishing tier 1 behavior supports in your home, because all children need this foundation and it's effective in reducing problem behavior for the majority of children. And then some of you might already be opting out thinking, trust me, my child needs more intensive support. But you may be surprised to find that what they really need is a more intensified tier 1 support. And even if they do need more intensive support, tier 1 level or that foundation, it serves as a foundation for more targeted and intensive supports. So just hang in there with me. Your child's school likely uses PBIS if they have school-wide expectations like the following. So this is a behavior matrix. As you can see on the left side, we have be safe, be responsible, be respectful. These are the school-wide expectations that the school has chosen. And then at the top, we have arrival and dismissal, stairs, hallway. These are the different parts of the routine or situations where they want these expectations, where they want to see these expectations. And then there's examples given of what those expectations look like in each setting. So for example, we have be respectful. At arrival and dismissal, that looks like using sidewalks and crosswalks and being kind to others and listening to all staff and patrol. And later in this presentation, we're going to talk about how to create a behavior matrix for your home with your own expectations. So like I said, not only is PBIS highly effective in schools, it's also really effective in reducing problem behaviors in the home. And that is what we're going to be focusing on the rest of this presentation. So this is just a short video that was created by our lab that kind of just introduces the basic strategies of PBIS in the home.
Positive behavior interventions and supports, also known as PBIS, is used to promote positive behaviors. You can use these 5 essential PBIS strategies in your home to increase positive behaviors. Structure. Make a schedule. Expectations and rules. Identify behaviors you want to see. Child engagement. Use child's preferences and choices. Acknowledge with positive feedback. Reward the behaviors you want to see. Respond calmly to inappropriate behavior. Use neutral tone to correct behavior and restate the behavior you want to see. These 5 PBIS strategies will help increase positive behavior for the entire family.
So this video mentioned 5 PBIS strategies you could use in your home to increase positive behavior. And obviously there's only 4 on the screen. And that's because for the sake of this presentation, 2 of those are going to fall under the category of reinforcement. So the video mentioned creating structure through creating a schedule and then having expectations or identifying the behaviors that you want to see in your home. And then under reinforcement, that was child engagement. So you're going to use your child's preferences and choices. You got to figure out what's reinforcing to them. And then also under reinforcement was acknowledge with positive feedback. We're going to reward the behaviors that we want to see. And then the 4th is going to be respond calmly to inappropriate behaviors when they do occur. So the rest of the presentation, we're going to go through each of these and figure out what it looks like and how to implement it in our home. So the first strategy is establishing structure through routines. So kids are really used to routines. At school, everything is scheduled out to a T. They know what time they have to be at school. They know what time lunch is. They know what time recess is, what time math time is, and they might even know what time they're allowed to go to the bathroom. And this structure or these routines can really help kids feel less anxiety, and it just creates more organization that can help reduce problem behaviors from occurring. So having a schedule at home, especially for those of you who are trying to balance working from home and helping your child with remote learning, having a schedule is going to really be a lifesaver. It's going to help reduce stress and chaos in your home. And so this is just an example of how like an elementary routine could compare to a home routine. And on the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you different ways you might be able to set up a routine. So you could go and be fancy and make a color coordinated schedule. There's lots of templates you can find online for free. Pinterest has a lot of them. And so you could go in and add your schedule and color code it, but you really don't have to be fancy. Honestly, you can just grab a piece of paper and write out your schedule by hand with whatever you have lying around. You could also create a schedule for different days of the week. Maybe your Monday looks really different from your Tuesday, and so you could have a Monday, Wednesday schedule and a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. If you have younger kids, it's going to be important to try to have a schedule with some pictures on it so that the kids can see the picture and they know what's happening throughout the day for those kids who can't read. And then this is just another example I found online that I thought was really creative, a little over the top, but it's just a clock that kind of has their after school routine broken down and it's color coded or color coordinated. But like I said, you don't have to be fancy. You really just need a visual breakdown of the day. And what's most important is that your routine is visually posted somewhere and that you review it frequently with your children. So a great place is to put it on your fridge, for example. So after creating more structure through a schedule, the next strategy is to implement teaching expectations. I think this poem really helps emphasize the importance of teaching expectations. So it says, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach, we punish. And so the question is why can't we finish this last sentence as automatically as we do the others? Sometimes our first instinct when a child misbehaves is to punish them in order to teach them that the behavior is unacceptable, and we often only rely on punishment. But remember, one of the principles of PBIS is that behavior is learned. So if we want our children to have more positive behaviors, we have to teach them those positive behaviors. And not only are we going to teach them what our expectations are for positive behaviors, we also need to teach them how to do those behaviors. There's a difference between knowing the expectation and then knowing how to do it. So when you're ready to establish your expectations, you're going to choose 3 to 5 behavioral expectations. And you really want to keep it in this range. If you select too many expectations, it's going to be overwhelming and confusing. So I really suggest, sticking in the 3 to 5 category. And if you have 3 expectations and your kids get those down and you need to add another one, then maybe you could work on that. I also want to recommend that if your child does have school-wide expectations, to try to use those and just accommodate them to what they look like in your home. And the reason for this is the more consistency we can create between school and home, it's really going to help to reinforce the desired behaviors and create less confusion. And then you also want to make sure your expectations are stated positively. So instead of a negatively stated expectation, such as no disrespect, is only teaching children what not to do and not necessarily what they should do. So we're going to make it more positive, and instead of saying no disrespect or no fighting, we could say my expectation is be respectful or be kind or be safe. So we're going to make sure that they're stated positively. And so when creating your expectations, it might be useful to use a chart like the following. So first, you're going to identify one of your expectations that you would like to have in your home. And then you're going to come up with a rationale or a reason why this rule or expectation is important to your family. It turns out, because I said so isn't always as effective as a rationale as we would like it to be. And actually, studies show that when kids know what the reason behind the rule, they're more likely to comply. So our expectation for this chart is be respectful. And then the rationale is being respectful helps our family to be happier and have more peace in our home. And then the third, you're going to identify examples across settings. So on the left, we have what this behavior looks like generally, what it looks like during free time, what it looks like during mealtime, and you could change those depending on what your schedule or your expectations are. So generally, being respectful looks like speaking kindly to others or listening to parents the first time. And then a non-example would be calling names, being rude, or ignoring parents and directions. So this chart can be really helpful just to help you brainstorm and really identify clearly what that expectation looks like. So once you have come up with your expectations, you're ready to create your own behavioral matrix. And this is an example given by PBIS.org. The idea is that your family expectations go down the left, so they've chosen be safe, be responsible, be respectful. And then the different settings or parts of your routine you want to see those expectations are at the top. So we have virtual classroom, mealtime, and bedtime. Now, so for example, we have be respectful during virtual classroom looks like keeping background noise to a minimum when engaged. Or being responsible during mealtime looks like washing your hands before helping with meal prep or eating. You could also add a column for what your expectations are for free time with or playing with siblings, or you could add a column for what your expectations are for using electronics. You could really add anything that you want. Here's another example. The expectations for this matrix are kind to self, kind to others, and kind to our home. And as you can see, being kind to self in the morning looks like brushing your teeth and eating a healthy breakfast. Being kind to others during homework looks like staying in your own space, using headphones or turning speakers off, and using kind words when someone helps you. And then being kind to our home in the playtime, during playtime looks like taking care of your toys and keeping rough play outside. So this matrix is actually a template provided by PBIS.org. It's pretty easy. You can go in and just personalize it. And when we upload this webinar, we'll have some resources available, and this will be one of them. Now, PBIS isn't just for kids. If you have older kids or teens, you could still create a behavior matrix for them and just adjust it for your expectations. So being respectful at mealtime, maybe for preteens or teens, could look like speaking kindly to family and putting electronics away. Being responsible during schoolwork could be doing homework without being asked or turning in assignments on time. And being safe while hanging out with friends could include answering texts and calls immediately from parents, or calling parents if they're in an unsafe or uncomfortable situation. So you can still adapt this to make it work for older kids as well. Now, after you've come up with your expectations, it's time to teach your expectations. And this is where that one chart, this one, is going to be really helpful. So first, you're going to introduce the expectation to your kids, and you're going to explain the reason behind it. You can discuss give your examples and your non-examples, and review what that expectation is going to look like across different settings. And this could be really fun, especially for younger kids. They would love to be able to act it out, what the example looks like, and I bet they would have even more fun acting out what the example doesn't look like. So you could really make it fun. And then you're going to, after discussing it, you have to teach it to them. And we're going to do this by showing or modeling that expectation to your kids. And then you can practice together, and then you can have them practice by themselves while you watch. They can show it back to you. But also, one important part about being proactive is reminding your child of your expectations in different settings. So instead of just waiting for your child to go into playtime and fight with their siblings before it is time to play with siblings, you could remind them that my expectation is that you speak respectfully or you play kindly with your siblings. Or it's bedtime. Do you remember what the expectations for bedtime are? So again, we're being proactive. By reminding them what our expectations are before they get into that situation, it's going to help reduce the likelihood that problem behavior will occur. Okay. And then now remember that one of the principles of PBIS is that behavior is lawful, meaning behavior occurs when there is some kind of reward. If you want your kids to follow your new expectations, we're going to have to give them some kind of motivation to do it. So one type of reinforcement that is really important to help children comply with expectations is behavior-specific praise. So with behavior-specific praise, you're going to verbally praise your child anytime you see them following your expectation. And you want to make sure that your praise is about a specific behavior, and you want to tie it back to your expectations. So this looks like, so if your expectation is be safe, and your child likes to run in the house and you just saw them walking calmly through the house, you would want to say, thanks for being safe by not running in the house. Or if your expectation is being respectful, it could be, I love how you are being respectful by listening to directions the first time. And then let's jump down to kind to our home. That could be, hey, thanks for being kind to our home by putting your toys away. So as you can see, I'm identifying the very specific behavior and how that behavior ties back to one of my expectations. So behavior-specific praise, what we just went over, it's crucial. It helps children know exactly what it is that they did right. However, there are other types of reinforcement you could use in addition to, but probably not in replacement of behavior-specific praise. So, for example, you may need to use a heavier reinforcement when first teaching children expectations. So let's say your children never pick up their toys. The first time that they pick up their toys on their own, you're going to want to say, thanks for being responsible by picking up your toys. So there's the behavior-specific praise, but you might want to add a heavier reinforcement. You can have 5 extra minutes of TV time. So we're still giving that behavior-specific praise to identify why they're getting this reward. But you might want to use something that's a little bit more rewarding when children are just learning a behavior. So it's really going to help to heavily reinforce it. It's also important to use your child's preferences and choices. So what's rewarding to one kid might not be rewarding to another. One kid may love tangibles such as treats, while another kid really loves attention or having one-on-one time with you. So what you could do is you could sit down with your kid and your children and you could brainstorm together what they would like to earn for good behavior. So even if you do have a schedule and you create expectations and reinforce those expectations, like I said, problem behavior is not going to disappear. You're still going to see it occasionally, but you likely won't see it as often. But when it does come up, we need to talk about how to correct problem behavior. So let's say, for example, that your child calls their sister a bad name or a mean name. So you're going to want to quickly correct the behavior, identify, so that was not respectful, and then restate your expectation. My expectation is that you speak kindly to your sister. And then you're going to want to make sure you have an opportunity for positive interaction. So let's try again. How can you speak respectfully to your sister? And you're going to want to reward that, that positive interaction by providing positive feedback, such as, that was a nice thing to say. Great job being respectful. So this is how to appropriately correct behaviors when they come up. Sometimes behavior correction isn't enough though. And so for this reason, it can be really helpful to create a behavior consequence or a consequence hierarchy chart. You want your consequences to be predictable and consistent, so children know exactly what's going to happen if they don't follow your expectations. So for example, I still have my behavior correction on there. And then after that, after I've given my behavior correction and it's still not working, I'm going to want to reteach. So that would look like, that's step 2. Remember, being respectful helps our family to be happier and have more peace in our home. How can you show respect in this situation? So you're giving a behavior correction, and then if they're still not getting it, try reteaching it. Maybe they didn't learn it as well as we thought. And then third, you could have timeout, and that could look like, so that's the 3rd time you haven't been respectful. Step 3 is timeout for 5 minutes. And then you could have like loss of privileges for the day or being grounded. Now, you can easily adapt this chart to fit your own desires, the consequences you would like to implement. I would recommend, though, keeping at least number 1 and 2 of giving a behavior correction and reteaching it. And then you could decide what consequences you want to come after that. You can also adapt this chart to fit younger children or older children. You could split the behavior consequence section down the middle, and one side could be your consequences for your younger children, on the other side could be your consequences for your older children. So just some tips, some things to keep in mind when giving behavior consequences. Even though you're likely frustrated, you're going to want to try to stay calm and deliver that correction or that consequence in a neutral tone of voice, and really try to avoid arguing and lecturing. Be sure to remember to tie that consequence back to your expectation so that they know how their behavior didn't meet your expectation. You want to be consistent. This is important because if your kid gets away with calling their sibling a name sometimes in your presence and not others, it's going to be really hard to reduce that problem behavior when it's not always, when the same consequences aren't always applied. And then as soon as you see the appropriate behavior, you want to make sure you really reward that behavior as soon as you see it. And then just to keep in mind, keeping your consequences posted and visible somewhere where they can see it. And then for timeout, just a recommendation, if you're going to use timeout, there is, the recommendation is that it's 1 minute for every year-old. So a 3-year-old would get 3 minutes in timeout, a 5-year-old would get 5 minutes in timeout. So let's say after you've had to implement a behavior consequence, you're really going to want to try to reinforce positive behavior as much as you can. So one recommendation is a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio. So let's say you had to give one correction or one consequence. You're going to want to try to find 5 other opportunities to reinforce positive behavior. And that's just really going to help to increase on-task behavior, so your kids are doing what you expect them to do, that they have fewer disruptive behaviors. But really it's to help so that there's greater compliance with expectations in the future. So it's not just like you're constantly getting onto them. You're going to look for as many opportunities to reinforce those behaviors or positive behaviors after a negative behavior has occurred. So after you've created all of this, you've created your schedule and your family expectation chart and your behavior consequences. I would recommend putting them on the same piece of paper or on a poster or just all together in the same place. And you could hang this up on your fridge so that they're all together. And you want to make sure that they're visible and that you review them as often as possible with your children. And then just to review kind of what we've talked about is that PBIS is proactive. We're going to really try to plan for the future to help make sure problem behaviors are less likely to happen. We're going to create structure by having a schedule, and then we're going to have expectations that we teach to our children. We're going to reinforce those expectations with behavior-specific praise, and then we're going to, whenever there continues to be problem behavior, we're going to use behavior correction and a consequence hierarchy. Now, so that's basically this presentation. And then just to wrap up, I do want to note that when you are first implementing this in your home, there could be a chance that your children's problem behavior might increase, at least temporarily, because this is new and they're going to try to push the boundaries and see just how much you're going to stick to your consequences and your expectations. So I just want to recommend that you really stay solid and consistent in your consequences and keeping those expectations there. And eventually that spike should decrease and you'll see less problem behavior. So these are the references that were used. And then also I just want to invite you all to follow us on social media. So Burst, we have that video I showed you. We have lots of other videos that talk about a whole variety of topics. We have behavior principles, tackling boredom, positive reinforcement, and we have these in 7 different languages. And you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Also, our general lab, U-TTEC, we have a Twitter. You can follow us there. And this presentation will eventually be posted at the U-TTEC lab website. And if you have any additional questions, you can email me here and I can try to answer those questions. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Morgan. I think that there are some folks who you can admit to the room. And I know I have a question after we let other folks in. All right, so my question is for parents who are out there wanting to do this stuff virtually, what's the low-hanging fruit? Like, what's the easiest thing they can do right away?
Right away, I think it would be to reinforce or to have some clear expectations and then reinforce those expectations anytime you see them. So let's say your child fights with their sibling a lot. Anytime they're not fighting with their sibling, reinforce. I love how you're playing with your sibling so nicely right now. That really makes me happy. And so you're not necessarily having to create a schedule and have these explicit expectations. You're just reinforcing the behavior that you want to see. And that's going to really help reduce the likelihood that problem behavior is going to occur. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question a little bit.
No, I really appreciate that. Thanks.
I just wanted to say this was a very well described explanation of PBIS. I mean, it was so clear and to the point. This should be used in faculty discussions. I mean, you did a really great job, Morgan. And one thing I really loved, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to note the clock example that you have. I have never seen that before. And rather than having schedules written out, lengthy, having to go over them, you would probably have to go over the same concepts during the clock, but it's just, it's all right there. And just compact, and it seems very intuitive to understand. And I'm going to do that next time I have an opportunity with these kids. I think that would be a really cool way to, have some like pre-correction strategies or something, just like let them know this is what's going on today. This is what this color represents. I really like that. And I'm definitely going to try and use that in my practice in the future. So thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate that.
No, thanks, Senator. I don't have the credit. I found that one online and just thought it was super cool. So.
Thanks so much, Morgan. I also think you just did such an incredible job of giving really clear examples of what PBIS can look like in the home. I think, coming for me as a parent of a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, I think too, for us as parents, like we're not going to do it perfect every day. So what I like about your presentation too is it helps parents pause and then think, okay, that didn't work. How could I do it different? Like later today or tomorrow or next time that behavior occurs. An example I'll give for that is my son forgot about an assignment for his remote learning, and I was stressed out and I immediately went to punishment. So I said, if you forget an assignment, I might not be able to let you play video games. So I immediately said what he didn't do instead of what he did do. And actually he hasn't been instructed how to manage his time completely yet. So he still needs prompting from me as the parent. And what I should have said and started with is, hey, you have turned in all of your assignments except for one. Rock on, awesome job. Hey, if you next time get all your assignments turned in, I'd like to give you some extra video game time. That would be an example of what I kind of took away from some of the things that you said today as a parent.
I think, reinforcement is a really powerful tool. So.
How much input do you want like kids to have when you're creating expectations? Like I know reinforcement, you want a lot of input on what will be reinforcing to them, but when you're creating the expectations themselves, how much do you consult with them?
That's a really good question, and I think it could depend on the age of the children, but I would try to involve them as much as possible, because if they're in the process or if they're involved in the process of creating these expectations and they understand the reasons behind them, they're going to be more motivated to comply because they helped create them. So as much as you can to brainstorm expectations together as a family and why they're important to your family, I think it can really help kids be more invested. So I don't know if there's any more questions or.
Morgan, thank you so much. This was such a great presentation, and thanks everyone for jumping in with questions and just thoughts. I really appreciate that. Another big round of applause for Morgan.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
So that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you all so much for joining. Just want to echo what Morgan said towards the end of her presentation. Please check out the lab's social media accounts, also the lab's website. Morgan's presentation and also any handouts that she mentioned will be posted there. We will be having our next webinar in October, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you again so much for joining today.